Shalom Na'aleh viewers. This year is dedicated to the memory of Rachalea Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi. We are right now starting a new series, a series on the Haggadah Shel Pesach, or the text of what we say at the Pesach Seder on the night of Pesach, of Passover. Today I would like to discuss the history of the Haggadah. How did it develop? When were the different parts added to the Haggadah? Hopefully, in another shiur, we will discuss the purpose of each of the sections and why they were added to the Haggadah. Most of this class is based on the Haggadah right in front of you. Here it says Haggadah Shlema. This is a Haggadah written by two people, Rav Kasher and Rav Shmuel Ashkenazi. This Haggadah explains many things about the historical aspects of the Haggadah, including it has an overview of many of the commentators on the Haggadah. So it's a valuable tool, and if you can read Hebrew, it's an amazing Haggadah to use. So let us begin. What is the earliest source for the Haggadah? Who are the ones who put it together? We have parts of the Haggadah written in the Mishnah, meaning the time of the Tanaim. We have other parts of the Haggadah which are written in the Gemara, meaning times of the Amoraim. We have parts of the Haggadah that are written in Aramaic, meaning the Jews were already in exile in Bavel, in Babylonia. We have other parts at the very end that are songs of even later origin. So again, that brings us back to the question, who is the one who has misader the Haggadah? Now we do not know who was the Orech, who was the one who took all the different parts and put it together into the text that we know today. However, we do know people who wrote the Haggadah down. Apparently it was already compiled before their time, but we do have original texts. Now Rav Kasher explains that the bulk of the Haggadah, the main part, the essence of the Haggadah, was already codified, was already mitukan by the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, by the rabbis of the Great Assembly. However, it was not the complete portion that we have today. And how do we know that? Well, we know because later on, after the time period of the Great Assembly, after the time of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, in the Gemara, we have discussions and arguments between different Amoraim where they argue over what is the main mitzvah, or rather, how you are supposed to fulfill the mitzvah of telling your children at the Pesach Seder about what happened to us in Mitzrayim. Specifically, in Gemara Pesachim, page 117, we are told of a machloket between Rav and Shmuel. And again, these are late Tanaim or early Amoraim. They're on that border time. And their machloket, their argument, is what are we supposed to begin with? There is a concept. Matchil bignos u'mesayem b'shevach. We start with the negative parts, with the derogatory parts, and we finish off with praise. And the thing that they argue over is what do we begin and what do we end with? What is the praise and what is the negative? Which negative point in our history should we begin with when we start our Haggadah? Which positive point should we finish it off with in their Haggadah? The fact that they're still arguing it over in the time of the Amoraim teaches us that at that point, the text was still not fully established. The Avudraham explains that originally there were alternate versions. He says we have Abaya's and Rava. Again, Abaya and Rava's versions would be parallel to Rav and Shmuel's that I just mentioned. One of them says that the negative thing we start with is that we are originally slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. The other one says that the negative thing we start with is that we originally were idol worshippers. And he said, eventually, the Orecha Haggadah, the person who compiled the Haggadah that we have, took the two versions and made them into one. A shilov, a combination. And that is what we use today. However, there is a rule in the Talmud, and that is when Abaya and Rava argue, who do we follow? We follow Rava. And therefore he says, when we look at the actual text, the portion that's first in the Haggadah is Rava's portion. Rava was the one who said, the negative part that we would begin with is the fact that we were slaves. Therefore, that is mentioned first before we have the negative part that Abaye said we should start with, which is that we serve idols. So like I said, the fact that in the Talmud, in the Gemara, they're still arguing over what part to begin with teaches us that at that point, the text of the Haggadah was still not completed. Now, when was it completed? And do we have any evidence of that? Now, after the time of the Amoraim, we have the Geonim and we have the Saboraim, or rather the Saboraim and the Geonic period. Now, who are these people? The Geonim were rabbis who were Roshei Yeshivot. They were the heads of yeshivot in Babylonia, in Babel. Two of the main yeshivot at that time were Sura and Pumbedisa. Those are the name of two of the yeshivot. Again, Sura and Pumbedisa.